I thought my son's wedding would be a celebration, a moment to finally breathe after years of working, grieving, and building a life from nothing. I never imagined it would turn into a public execution of my dignity. My name is Lillian Grant, and 12 years ago, I buried my husband and raised my son Evan on my own. I worked every job I could find, cleaning homes, managing a small recovery center, helping others rebuild their lives. I didn't have much, but I had pride, I had honesty, and I believed those things mattered. Until that night. It happened under a chandelier dripping with gold, in a ballroom filled with 150 guests. The orchestra played soft jazz, laughter echoed through the air, and I thought, just for a moment, that everything had been worth it. My son looked handsome, happy, and the bride, Samantha Hayes, was glowing. Then she picked up the microphone. "I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight," she said, her voice smooth as honey. "Marriage is about two families joining together, no matter how different those families might be." There was a ripple of polite laughter. I smiled, trying to believe she meant well. Then she looked straight at me. "Some of us come from generations of class, business, and culture," she continued. "And some of us, well, we build from less, much less." The crowd went silent. The only sound was a waiter's glass hitting the floor. Evan froze beside her. I could feel 150 pairs of eyes turned toward me, waiting for my reaction. I didn't move. My spine straightened, my face still. I could hear my late husband's voice in my mind. "Never let small people make you feel smaller." I smiled. Just a quiet, patient smile. Samantha's smirk widened, thinking she'd won. She lifted her glass. "To family," she said sweetly, "to progress, and to knowing our place in the world." The laughter that followed was thin and nervous. My son didn't laugh. He just stared at the floor, ashamed. I stood up slowly, letting my chair slide back without a sound. My hand trembled, but not from fear, from control. I raised my glass and said softly, "To truth. It has a way of finding everyone's place, doesn't it?" A few guests clapped uncertainly. Samantha blinked. She didn't know why the word truth unsettled her. But I did, because what she didn't know was that her entire $5 million family business was a lie, and I had proof in my purse. Her parents, her company, her story, it was all fiction. Hayes Enterprises, the empire she bragged about, was a hollow shell dissolved years ago. Her father and mother were professional actors from a Los Angeles casting agency, and the woman who just called me low-class trash, she'd been doctor shopping for 8 months, hoarding prescription pills in her designer handbag. She thought she was humiliating me. She had no idea she was standing on the edge of her own destruction. The rest of the night moved in slow motion. The music started again, the guests forced smiles, but I sat there, watching her laugh and pose for photos, and all I could think was how fragile her perfect little world really was. When the reception ended, she came to me, smiling that same smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Lillian," she said sweetly, resting her manicured hand on mine. "I hope you didn't take my joke too personally. You know how emotional these nights can be." I looked at her, calm, measured, dangerous. "Don't worry," I said softly. "You'll understand emotion soon enough." For the first time, she lost her composure, just a flicker. Then she turned away. That night, I went home, kicked off my shoes, and laid everything out on my kitchen table. Bank statements, business records, copies of forged contracts, and the medical files Dr. Marjorie had sent me, the ones proving Samantha's addiction and her fake prescriptions. Under the kitchen light, I read every page slowly. The shell companies, the casting agency invoices, the payments, all traced back to one account. S. Hayes Financial Services, a ghost business with a ghost owner. The woman who called me trash had built her entire life on counterfeit wealth and stolen drugs. I whispered to the empty room, "You think I'm low class? Then you've never met someone with real class." The next morning, I called 2 people, Dr. Marjorie Lane, my closest friend, and Carter Vance, an investigator who owed me a favor. "We're not done," I told them. "Not yet." Because I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was protecting my son from a woman who'd made lies her career, and I wasn't going to let her destroy him. So if you're listening now, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because what happened next will make you believe in one thing: justice always finds its audience. 6 months earlier, it all began with a dinner. One polite evening that turned into the first crack in a perfect facade. 6 months before that disastrous wedding, I met her for the first time. Samantha Hayes, the woman who would eventually tear my family apart and unknowingly hand me the weapon that destroyed her own world. Evan had called me one Sunday afternoon, sounding nervous but excited. "Mom, I want you to meet someone," he said. "She's special." Of course, I agreed. I had prayed for years that he'd find someone kind, grounded, someone who'd love him for the same reasons I did. I spent the morning making pot roast, his favorite, set the good plates on the table, and wore a blue dress Daniel once said made my eyes shine. When the doorbell rang, I smiled, expecting warmth. Instead, the air shifted the moment she walked in. Samantha Hayes was beautiful, stunning even, perfect blonde hair, flawless skin, an outfit that whispered expensive in every thread. She shook my hand lightly, her perfume too strong, her eyes scanning my house like an appraiser. "This is lovely," she said, her tone polite but distant. "Very cozy." Evan smiled nervously, trying to fill the silence. "Mom worked hard on this place," he said. "She started from scratch after Dad passed." "Oh," Samantha said softly, as if she'd just learned I was missing a limb. "That's inspiring." Her eyes drifted to the photo on the mantel, me and Daniel on our wedding day, both of us laughing, covered in flour from baking our own cake. She smiled without warmth. "You two look happy. Simple times, huh?" Something about that word, simple, stuck like a splinter. Dinner was awkward from the start. She picked at her food, pretending to eat. When I asked about her family, she lit up immediately. "My parents run Hayes Enterprises," she said proudly. "Real estate and luxury developments. My father's been in the business for 30 years. Old money." Evan nodded. "They're incredible, Mom. They're even thinking about expanding into California." "That's impressive," I said, though a small voice inside me hesitated. "What kind of developments?" Samantha smiled. "Mostly luxury villas, exclusive properties. You probably wouldn't have heard of them." The way she said "you probably wouldn't have heard," it wasn't meant to be cruel, but it was. A quiet dismissal, like I wasn't part of her world and never would be. I smiled anyway. Maybe not, but I've spent most of my life helping people afford homes they can actually live in, not just look at. For a split second, her smile faltered. Then she laughed softly, brushing imaginary dust off her wrist. "That's sweet." Evan jumped in, desperate to change the subject. "Sam graduated top of her class from Stanford, Mom." "Oh?" I said, genuinely curious. "What did you study?" She paused, just a second too long. "Finance," she said finally. "And design." That hesitation didn't escape me. Years of reading people, comforting patients, watching liars deny their addictions, those instincts never fail you. Something about her story felt polished, rehearsed. As dinner went on, I noticed little things. The way she flinched when I mentioned working in elder care, the way she avoided looking at my hands, still rough from years of scrubbing and lifting, and how she kept glancing toward Evan, as if checking to see if she was performing well enough. At dessert, I offered her homemade pie. She waved it away. "Oh, I don't really eat sweets. Sugar ruins your skin." I chuckled. "Well, dear, it's kept me going for 60 years. Evan laughed. Samantha didn't. When they left, I stood at the door watching them go. She slipped her arm through his like a trophy, perfectly posed under the porch light, and for the first time, I felt something in my gut, something cold. It wasn't jealousy. It was instinct. I closed the door slowly, letting the sound echo through the quiet house. On the table, 2 plates sat untouched. Her glass of wine was still half full. I walked back into the kitchen, leaned on the counter, and whispered, "Something's not right about that girl." I didn't know it then, but that uneasy feeling was the beginning of everything. The lies, the investigations, the humiliation, and eventually, justice. That night, I opened my laptop, curiosity already tugging at me. I typed Hayes Enterprises into Google. Dozens of results popped up, none of them real, just placeholder pages, empty websites, copy-paste slogans, and even one logo stolen from a furniture company. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. Then I whispered, "You can't hide everything behind pretty pictures, Samantha." And I smiled. Not because I knew what was coming, but because I finally realized something. People who build fake lives always underestimate those who built theirs the hard way. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe Samantha's coldness was just nerves, or her pride came from insecurity. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe my son had chosen someone kind. But the weeks that followed told me everything I needed to know. Evan started calling less. The man who used to drop by every Sunday after church stopped showing up altogether. When I called, he'd say, "Sorry, Mom, Sam's been busy with work. We'll visit next weekend." But next weekend never came. I began to hear about their lives through social media instead. Pictures of dinners at high-end restaurants, luxury weekend getaways, designer outfits with matching captions about success, class, and legacy. In none of those pictures was there any sign of the humble young man who used to fix my leaky faucet and eat soup out of chipped bowls. One evening, I called him again, trying to sound casual. "Evan, are you free for dinner this week? I'll make that stew you love." There was a long pause. "Mom," he said finally, "Sam thinks we should start setting boundaries. Make sure we have space as a couple." I held the phone tighter. "Boundaries? Evan, I'm your mother, not your landlord." He sighed. "It's not like that. She just thinks you're still treating me like a kid." I wanted to say, "That's what mothers do." Instead, I said quietly, "If you need space, sweetheart, I'll give it to you." After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. It felt like the house itself had grown emptier. The next week, I ran into Mrs. Carter from the church choir. She smiled politely and said, "I saw photos of your son's engagement party. What a beautiful place. You must be so proud." I forced a smile. Yes, very proud. But inside, my stomach twisted. Engagement party? I hadn't even known there was one. That night, I went on Facebook and saw the pictures. A candlelit garden, a champagne tower, and Samantha in a shimmering silver dress holding Evan's arm. The caption read, "When two families of equal class finally unite." Equal class. I stared at those words for a long time. Every like, every heart reaction felt like a knife twisting deeper. She wasn't just trying to erase me. She was rewriting my son's story, turning him into someone who fit her fantasy. The next Sunday, I decided to visit. I baked a pie and drove across town to their new apartment, a luxury high-rise with a private lobby and valet parking. The doorman looked at me, hesitating. "Name, please?" "Lillian Grant," I said. "I'm his mother." He called upstairs, then frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, they're not receiving visitors right now." Not receiving visitors. My own son. I drove home that night with the pie still on the passenger seat, untouched. I didn't cry. I was too angry to cry. 2 days later, Evan finally called. His voice was soft, uncertain. "Mom, Sam said you stopped by. You really shouldn't just show up like that. It makes her uncomfortable." I took a deep breath. "Uncomfortable? Evan, I raised you in a one-bedroom apartment. I worked double shifts to pay your tuition. I've earned the right to knock on your door." He went silent. I could hear Samantha's voice in the background, low and sharp. Then he said, "Please, Mom, don't make things harder." And just like that, The call ended. That night, I went out to my garden and sat on the old wooden bench Daniel built before he died. I stared at the sky and whispered, "What did I do wrong?" The wind rustled through the trees as if to answer, but the truth was, I already knew. I hadn't done anything wrong. I was just being pushed out of a world I didn't belong to. But deep down, I also knew something else. People who build walls around themselves are usually hiding something inside. A few days later, I saw Samantha's car outside the pharmacy downtown. She didn't see me. She was in the driver's seat, tapping her phone impatiently. Then, through the window, I watched her hand a slip of paper to the pharmacist. 10 minutes later, she left with 2 small white bags and a smile too wide to be innocent. My instincts buzzed. That wasn't a woman picking up vitamins. I didn't say anything to Evan that day. I just went home, sat at my kitchen table, and pulled out a notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "Find out who Samantha Hayes really is, because love blinds sons, but it sharpens mothers." And I was done being in the dark. The day I realized how far I'd fallen from my own son's world wasn't during one of our phone calls. It was at the rehearsal dinner, the night before the wedding, the night she made sure I knew exactly where I stood. I arrived early. Old habit. When you've spent years working in caregiving, you learn to show up before everyone else, to help, to do the quiet work no one notices. The event was at a luxury vineyard just outside the city, a place so perfect it didn't look real. Candlelight glittered across marble floors, a live quartet tuned their instruments, and servers moved like dancers in black suits. I was proud, even through my nervousness. I'd chosen a modest blue dress, the same color as the one I wore at Evan's college graduation. I brought a small bouquet of wildflowers I'd picked that morning, simple but beautiful. I thought she might appreciate them. When I handed them to Samantha, she blinked, then smiled politely, her lipstick flawless. "Oh, that's sweet," she said, looking at the bouquet like it was a dead bird. "We already have florists handling everything, but thank you." She turned and handed the flowers to a coordinator without another word. I tried to brush it off, forcing a smile. "I just thought you might want something from the garden. Daniel planted them years ago." "Oh," she replied flatly, "we prefer imported roses. They last longer." Evan appeared just then, kissed her on the cheek, and told her she looked stunning. He barely noticed me. He was glowing in her world, and I was a shadow standing in the corner. Then came dinner. Each guest's name was written in gold ink on small cards at every seat. When I walked toward the head table, a staff member stopped me. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said kindly. "You're at table 14. "Table 14? I repeated, looking around. The tables near the stage sparkled with champagne flutes and crystal centerpieces. Table 14 was near the door, behind a pillar, half hidden from view. I looked at the seating chart. Samantha's family, her supposed family, took up 3 whole tables up front. Hayes, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, Uncle Victor, Aunt Elise. I recognized none of them. Their smiles were identical, practiced, professional. Evan saw me standing there, awkward and uncertain. He hesitated for a second, then gave me a small nod. "It's just seating, Mom," he said quietly. "Don't make it a big deal." I nodded. Of course. But inside, something broke. I took my seat at table 14. The staff smiled politely. "Can I get you some champagne, ma'am?" "No, thank you," I said. My throat was too tight to drink anything. From my corner, I watched Samantha glide across the room, laughing with guests, touching arms, commanding attention like a queen holding court. Her parents, the fake ones, clinked glasses and bragged loudly about their estate in Napa and their projects overseas. Every word sounded rehearsed. I noticed something strange. One of the men, her so-called uncle, pulled out his phone to check an email. For a split second, I saw the name at the top of the message, Crown Casting Agency. My stomach dropped. Crown Casting. I'd seen that name before. It was listed on one of the websites that came up when I Googled Hayes Enterprises. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding, connecting the dots. The faces, the charm, the rehearsed stories, it all made sense. They weren't family. They were performers. That realization hit like lightning. I looked around the room again, really looking this time. The way the uncle smiled too wide, the way the aunt tilted her head just so, how everyone repeated the same polished lines about success and heritage. It was theater. And my son was standing in the middle of it, oblivious, smiling like the world was his. As the night went on, the speeches began. Samantha stood at the front, microphone in hand, pretending to wipe a tear. "I feel so blessed to be joining such a wonderful family," she said, gesturing toward her fake relatives. "And Evan, he's my heart, my future. We'll build our empire together." The guests applauded. I didn't. I just sat there, my hands tight around the napkin on my lap. Empire, that word again. Everything about her revolved around money, image, control. Then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife deeper, the waiter placed my meal in front of me, cold, forgotten. I smiled, quietly, painfully. Table 14, the table near the door, the table for people who didn't belong. When the dinner ended, I slipped out early. The cool night air hit me like truth. I walked through the parking lot, my heels clicking on the pavement, and whispered, "If they want to treat me like I'm invisible, then invisible is what I'll be, until I decide they see me again." When I got home, I poured a glass of water and stared at the bouquet I'd brought back with me. The wildflowers were already wilting, their petals curling inward. Daniel used to say, "People show you who they are when they think you're beneath them." And tonight, Samantha had shown me everything. I opened my notebook, flipped to the page where I'd written, "Find out who Samantha Hayes really is," and underlined it twice. Then I added a new line beneath it. "Start tomorrow." The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I woke up before sunrise, the words Table 14 still echoing in my mind. It wasn't just humiliation anymore, it was curiosity, sharp and restless. My instincts told me something was off, something deeper than arrogance or money. Samantha Hayes wasn't just unkind, she was pretending. I made coffee, sat down at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I typed Hayes Enterprises again. The website looked sleek. Shiny black and gold lettering, expensive photos, words like legacy, innovation, integrity. But when I scrolled down, nothing made sense. No real address, no employee names, no contact page, and the pictures of corporate headquarters were stock images. Then I clicked on Our Family. 6 faces smiled back, Samantha's and 5 others labeled as Hayes Family Partners. I leaned in, squinting. Their names didn't appear anywhere else online. I copied one, Victor Hayes, and pasted it into Google. The first result made me stop breathing. Victor Hayes, commercial actor, Crown Casting Agency. I sat frozen for a few seconds, then whispered, "You've got to be kidding me." I checked another one. Elise Hayes, appeared in national print ads for luxury brands. Same agency. Every single one of them. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. The family wasn't just fake. They were literally actors. Samantha had constructed an entire identity from paid strangers and rented images. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I closed the laptop, my heart pounding. I needed to talk to someone who could confirm what I was seeing, someone who knew how to look deeper. That's when I thought of Marjorie Lane, Dr. Lane, technically. We'd met years ago when I volunteered at her rehabilitation center. She was brilliant, meticulous, and she owed me a favor. When she answered the phone, her voice was the same, steady, warm, no nonsense. "Lillian, it's been ages. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I said quickly. "Listen, I need your help. Quietly." There was a pause. "This sounds serious." "It is." I explained what I'd found, how Samantha's family didn't exist, how the business was a facade. Marjorie didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. "Send me what you have," she said. "I'll dig into it." That night, I emailed her the links, screenshots, and every odd detail I'd collected. Then I sat by the window, listening to the wind rattle the trees outside. My nerves were shot, but beneath them was something else, a spark of purpose. 2 days later, Marjorie called back. "Lillian, you were right," she said. "Hayes Enterprises was registered 5 years ago under a fake address. It's a shell company. There's no tax record, no payroll, no permits. It's smoke and mirrors." My stomach tightened. "And the people?" "Actors," she said. "All of them." I cross-checked their names with Crown Casting's online portfolio. Samantha's been renewing contracts every 6 months under a pseudonym, S. Hart. The payments come from a series of shell accounts that link back to a Los Angeles bank. I closed my eyes, letting that sink in. So she's been lying about everything. "Not just lying," Marjorie said quietly. "She's laundering money through those accounts." The room tilted for a second. I gripped the edge of the counter. "Laundering?" "Yes, and there's more. She's filling prescriptions under multiple doctor names. Controlled substances. It's messy. I'm sending everything I found." I opened the email as soon as it arrived. Dozens of attachments. Copies of fake company records. Images of scripts from Crown Casting. Bank records with her signature. My eyes locked on one document in particular, a transaction summary showing a $50,000 payment to Crown Casting Agency, labeled Family Representation. I whispered, "Representation for what? A lie?" Marjorie's voice came through the phone. "You need to be careful, Lillian. If she's laundering money and faking documents, that's serious federal territory." I thought for a moment. So what do I do? "Don't confront her yet. Keep everything, back it up, and watch your son." I hung up, my hands trembling slightly. That night I called Evan. "Sweetheart," I said carefully, "how's work? How's Samantha?" He hesitated. "She's fine. Busy. Why?" "I just worry about you," I said softly. "You sound tired." "She's been stressed," he said. "The business stuff, her family's expectations, it's a lot. But she's doing her best." I wanted to scream, "There is no business. There is no family." But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I said, "Just promise me you'll be careful. Sometimes people hide their worst parts behind their best smiles." He laughed nervously. "You're overthinking again, Mom. Sam's not like that." After he hung up, I sat there, staring at the phone. My reflection in the dark window looked older, harder, sharper. I whispered to myself, "If he won't see the truth, I'll make sure the truth sees him." I turned off the lights and went to bed, but my mind was alive with plans. The next morning, I would start digging deeper into every corner of Samantha Hayes' perfect world, because no lie, no matter how expensive, survives daylight. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding heart and a restless mind. I couldn't stop thinking about those casting agency profiles. Every smiling face from Samantha's family now looked like a warning sign. I'd spent years helping people rebuild their lives after addiction, learning to see through denial and deception. And this felt the same. The lies were neat, polished, and carefully rehearsed. But they were still lies. I drove across town to Marjorie Lane's clinic, a beige building with ivy crawling up the brick. She was already waiting for me in her office, glasses perched on her nose, a folder open in front of her. "I didn't want to say too much on the phone," she began, "but you were absolutely right to call me." She turned the folder toward me. Inside were screenshots, corporate filings, and a single printed check. "Hayes Enterprises," she said, tapping the header. "Registered to a P.O. box in Pasadena. The address listed on the website? It's a rented co-working space. The people she calls her parents and uncles, actors for hire. She's been paying them through an intermediary called Mayfair Consulting, which, surprise, doesn't actually exist." My stomach twisted. She built an entire life on paper. Marjorie nodded grimly. And she's good at it. These contracts are detailed. Scripts, photo schedules, even family backgrounds. Whoever set this up knew exactly how to fool people. I leaned back in the chair, trying to absorb it. But why? Why go that far? Marjorie pushed another paper across the desk. It was a bank statement, showing transactions between multiple accounts. Because she's hiding money, she said. About $5 million, moved in small increments. It looks like she's using fake business expenses to wash it clean. I stared at the numbers. $5 million. She's not rich, Lillian. She's pretending to be. The house she claimed her parents owned, rented under a short-term lease, her so-called trust fund, empty. This woman's living on lies. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The air felt heavy. Finally, I said quietly, "And my son believes every word." Marjorie sighed. "Evan's blinded by love, and maybe by guilt. He wants to give her the life she pretends to have, but if she's this deep in fraud, you can't just sit back." I frowned. "What do you suggest?" She leaned forward. "I can't get involved officially, but I can connect you to someone who can look deeper, a financial investigator I trust. His name's Carter Vance. Discreet, smart, ethical. I'll make the call." She picked up her phone and stepped out of the room. Through the window, I could see patients walking past. Real people fighting real demons, facing their truth every day. Yet out there, Samantha Hayes was selling a fantasy and calling it a family. When Marjorie returned, she said, "Carter will reach out tonight. He's helped uncover elder scams and corporate fraud before. But Lillian, this could get ugly. You need to be ready." I nodded slowly. I've lived through ugly before. After I left the clinic, I stopped by a cafe I used to visit with Evan when he was a boy. The smell of coffee, the hum of quiet conversation, it all brought back memories. He used to tell me everything back then, every grade, every heartbreak, every dream. Now, he was marrying a woman whose life was a stage play. My phone buzzed with a text from Marjorie. "Carter confirmed. He'll run preliminary searches tonight. Keep this between us." That evening, I sat by my desk, flipping through old photo albums. Pictures of Evan with his father, playing in the park, birthdays in our small kitchen. Honest smiles, nothing fake. I whispered, "You deserve better than a woman who lies about her own blood." At 10:45, the phone rang. "Mrs. Grant," a calm male voice said, "this is Carter Vance. Dr. Lane briefed me." "Yes," I said. "Thank you for calling." "I'll make it quick. The name Hayes Enterprises appears in a flagged transaction database. It's been linked to several shell companies under investigation for financial misconduct. I'll need 48 hours to confirm." My pulse quickened. "So it's real?" "Oh, it's real," he said. "Just not in the way she claims. Whoever's behind it is hiding something big." When we hung up, I sat in silence, feeling the walls close in around me. The truth wasn't just dangerous. It was radioactive. I walked to my window and looked out at the quiet street below. The moonlight reflected off my car hood like a warning. I could almost hear my late husband's voice again. "Lily, you can't save people who refuse to tell the truth, but you can save the ones who still deserve it." I took a deep breath and whispered, "Then I'll save our son." For the first time in months, I knew exactly what I had to do. Tomorrow, I would meet Carter in person. I would get the evidence I needed, and when the time was right, I'd let Samantha Hayes expose herself, one lie at a time. Carter's message came at dawn. Just one line. "We need to meet. Bring your composure." I didn't need coffee that morning. Adrenaline was enough. I drove to a small diner off Route 9, the kind of place where no one looked twice at a woman sitting alone. Carter was already there, seated by the window, wearing a gray suit that had seen better days. His eyes, however, were sharp and unyielding, the kind of eyes that had seen too many lies and too few confessions. "Mrs. Grant," he said, as I slid into the booth, "you were right to come to me, and you were right about her." He opened a file. Inside were bank transfers, photocopied leases, and one photo that made my stomach drop. Samantha, standing outside a building with a bright red sign, Prestige Casting Agency. "I thought this was her office," I whispered. "It's not. It's where she hired her family." He flipped the next page, showing headshots. The mother, the father, even the cousin. All professional actors. Each signed a confidentiality clause and received cash payments through shell accounts tied to Hayes Enterprises. I stared at the glossy photos. She built her whole world on rented people. Carter nodded. "And she's still paying them. That $5 million you mentioned? It's not from real business. It's from staged investments, money cycling between fake accounts to look like income. It's laundering, Mrs. Grant." The word hit me like a blow. Laundering. This wasn't just deception, it was crime. "She's not just manipulating your son," Carter continued. "She's building a career on illusion. If Evan marries her, he becomes part of it, legally and financially." I felt my throat tighten. "Can you prove it?" "Oh, I can prove it," he said, sliding a USB drive across the table. "But proof doesn't always save hearts. Be careful how you use it." When I left the diner, I didn't drive home. Instead, I drove straight to the address printed on one of the rental contracts. Hayes Enterprises, Suite 3B, Glendale Plaza. The building was sleek from the outside. Mirrored glass, manicured hedges, the kind of facade that screams success. Inside, however, it was lifeless. A single receptionist sat at a shared desk with 4 other companies. "Hi," I said with a polite smile. "I'm here to see someone from Hayes Enterprises." The woman looked confused. "Who? Mr. or Mrs. Hayes?" She blinked. "There's no Hayes Enterprises here. That suite's rented by the hour for client meetings." "Rented?" "Yes, like a workspace subscription. Different tenants each week." My heart sank. I walked toward the elevator but paused when I saw a framed poster on the wall. A promotional photo for Prestige Casting. The same logo I'd seen in Carter's folder. And right there, in the corner of the poster, were the faces I recognized. Samantha's parents, smiling like a perfect family. For a moment I just stood there, staring. My pulse was pounding in my ears. Everything she'd built. The grand house, the elegant dinners, the smug superiority. It was all a performance. And my son was the audience. I left the building quietly and sat in my car for a long time. The sky was turning gold, morning traffic beginning to hum. People rushing to real jobs, real families, real lives. I thought about how many times Samantha had called me low class, how she'd looked at me like I was beneath her. But at least my world was real. I opened my phone and called Carter. "It's all true," I said. "I saw the agency. I saw the faces. She's living a lie so big it could collapse at any second." He replied, "Then the question is, who do you want to be when it collapses? The silent witness or the one holding the match?" I didn't answer. Not yet. That afternoon, I went back to my office at Silver Haven, the senior care center I'd built from scratch after my husband died. The place smelled faintly of lavender and lemon polish. Clients greeted me with warm smiles. "Morning, Mrs. Grant." "How's Evan's wedding coming?" I smiled back, but it felt hollow. Upstairs in my office, I opened my laptop. The documents from Carter glowed on the screen. Bank ledgers, fake invoices, falsified tax returns. Every click deepened my disbelief. Samantha hadn't just lied about her family. She'd fabricated an empire. I printed everything and organized it into a folder labeled "For Evan." But when I stared at his name, my hands hesitated. If I gave him this now, would he believe me? Or would Samantha twist it into another story, paint me as jealous, bitter, controlling? I closed the folder and locked it in my drawer. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. The image of Samantha's perfect smile haunted me. I imagined her at the wedding rehearsal, surrounded by actors pretending to love her, raising champagne glasses to nothing but air. And I thought of Evan, of how he used to laugh without restraint, how he used to hug me at every goodbye. She had stolen that warmth, dimmed it, turned it into obligation. As I turned off the lamp, I whispered, You can't fake love forever. But deep down, I knew she would try. And when she did, I'd be ready, with truth, proof, and a calm smile she'd never forget. The night I decided to tell Evan the truth, the sky broke open with thunder. Rain drummed against my kitchen windows as if the world itself was warning me to stop. But silence had cost me enough already. I was done letting fear disguise itself as patience. When Evan arrived, his hair was damp from the storm. He stood in the doorway like a man torn between duty and discomfort. "Mom, what's going on? You sounded serious." I motioned for him to sit. On the table between us was the folder Carter had given me, the one I'd been guarding like a weapon I didn't want to use. "I need you to listen," I said. "Not as my son, but as a man about to make the biggest mistake of his life." He frowned. "Mom, if this is about Samantha..." "It is." I slid the folder toward him. "And you're going to want to sit down before you open it." He hesitated, then flipped it open. Pages of bank transfers, fake company documents, casting contracts, all the proof of Samantha's illusion, spilled out like the contents of a wound. His eyes darted from one line to another. "What is this supposed to be?" "The truth," I said quietly. "Hayes Enterprises doesn't exist. Her family doesn't exist. Not the way she told you. Those people you met? They're actors, Evan. Hired through prestige casting. Paid to play parts in her story." He laughed, sharp and defensive. "That's insane. Why would she do that?" "Because she's building a lie so big even you believed it." He slammed the folder shut. "You hired someone, didn't you? A private investigator or whatever. God, Mom, do you have any idea how invasive this is? I had to protect you. From what? From the woman I love? From the woman who's using you?" The words hung heavy in the air, louder than the thunder outside. Evan stood, shaking his head. "You just can't stand that she's different from you, can you? That she comes from money, that she's not ashamed of it." I rose, meeting his anger with calm. "I don't care about money. I care about honesty, and Samantha doesn't have any." He turned toward the window, breathing hard. "You've always judged people, Mom. You did it to Dad's business partners, to my friends, and now to her. You think being real makes you better than everyone else." "Being real doesn't make me better," I said softly. "It just means I can sleep at night." He spun back to face me, his voice rising. "You can't stand seeing me happy." The accusation sliced through me. "You think that's happiness?" I asked, my voice trembling. "A life built on fraud? A woman who hides behind rented smiles and borrowed names? If that's what happiness looks like, then I pray you never find it." He stared at me for a long moment, eyes shining with betrayal. "You've gone too far." "Evan, please." "No," he cut in. "You're obsessed with the past, with proving something, but not everything has to be a fight, Mom." He grabbed his coat, his movements stiff and deliberate. "I can't do this tonight." "Evan, I'm not your enemy," I said. "I'm your mother." He paused at the door. "Then start acting like one." When the door slammed, the whole house seemed to exhale. I stood there in the silence, the folder still on the table, its papers damp from where his hand had rested. I wanted to chase after him, to shake him until he understood, but something inside me whispered, "Not yet. Let him see it himself." I walked into the living room and sat on the couch, the same place I used to read him bedtime stories when he was a boy. The thunder outside faded into a steady rain, and I thought of my late husband, Henry. He used to say storms had a purpose. They washed away what didn't belong. I reached for the small wooden box on the shelf, the one that held his letters. Inside, folded neatly, was the one he'd written before he died. "Respect yourself, even when they don't. Dignity isn't inherited, it's chosen." Tears welled in my eyes as I read it again. I pressed the paper to my chest and whispered, "I'm trying, Henry. I really am." Later that night, I found myself walking through Silver Haven's quiet halls. The lights were low, and most of the residents were asleep. Mrs. Adler, one of my oldest clients, was still awake, humming to herself by the window. She looked up when she saw me. "Rough night?" she asked gently. "You could say that." She smiled, her eyes kind but sharp. You know, people show their true selves when they think you've given up on them. Don't rush the ending, dear. Let the mask slip on its own. I nodded, holding back tears. Thank you. When I got home, I stood by the window watching the rain trace lines down the glass. Somewhere out there, my son was asleep beside a woman who thought she'd won. But masks don't last forever, and when hers fell, I'd be there, not out of vengeance, but because the truth deserved an audience. 3 days after that storm, I received a text from Samantha. It was short, calculated, and cold. Fitting for the gown tomorrow at Belle Maison, 2 p.m. Evan says you might want to come, if you can behave. It wasn't an invitation. It was a test. The next afternoon, I stood outside Belle Maison Bridal, watching raindrops slide down its glass windows. Inside, everything gleamed. Ivory gowns, champagne walls, the faint hum of piano music playing something expensive. I caught my reflection in the door before walking in. A woman in her late 50s, neat bun, pearl earrings, a posture that said she'd been underestimated before. Samantha was already there, turning in front of a mirror in a silk wedding dress that looked like it cost more than my car. 2 sales attendants fussed with the hem as she admired herself, chin high, smile practiced. "Oh," she said when she noticed me in the reflection. "You came." "I did," I said. "We need to talk." She didn't turn. "About what? My dress? Or your obsession with my family?" I took a slow breath, keeping my voice even. "About the truth." That made her turn. She looked at me like someone looking down from a balcony. "The truth? Or whatever story you've invented to make yourself feel important?" "I know about Hayes Enterprises," I said. Her smile didn't fade, but her eyes flickered, just for a second. "Of course you do. Everyone does. It's my family's company." "No," I said, taking a step closer. "It's not. It's a shell. Registered to a P.O. box, no staff, no assets. You've been paying people to act as your parents, your uncles, your cousins. You've built a family from lies." Samantha laughed softly, shaking her head as if she were talking to a delusional child. "You think you can scare me with Google searches and gossip? You have no idea how real power works, Mrs. Grant." "No," I replied, "but I know what real character looks like. And it's not this." She tilted her head, her expression sweet but sharp. "You're jealous, aren't you? You can't stand that your son finally found someone better, someone refined. You spent your life around sick people and small paychecks. Don't mistake that for dignity." The attendants froze, pretending not to hear. The room suddenly felt smaller. "Money doesn't buy class, Samantha," I said. "It buys silence, and for a while you've been very good at paying for silence." She took a slow step toward me, lowering her voice. "You think you can destroy me with some papers? Please, you wouldn't dare. You'd lose your son forever." "I already have," I said quietly, "because of you." That made her blink. For the first time, she lost her balance, not physically, but emotionally. The air between us crackled. Then she smirked again. "You know what your problem is, Lillian? You mistake moral lectures for leverage. You're not strong, you're sentimental. And sentimentality doesn't survive in my world." I smiled faintly. "You're right, it doesn't. But lies don't either." As I turned to leave, something slipped from her purse and hit the marble floor. A phone. Its screen lit up. A message preview flashed across it. "Casting agency, contract renewals for weekend event, confirm same group?" We both froze. Her hand darted down, but I was faster. I picked up the phone, read the message fully, then handed it back without a word. She snatched it, flustered, cheeks flushing red. "You have no right." "I don't need rights," I said, meeting her eyes. "I have the truth, and the truth doesn't need permission." Her mask cracked, just for a second. Beneath the anger, there was fear. The kind of fear that comes when someone realizes the game is almost over. I stepped back toward the door, my voice calm, deliberate. "See you at the wedding, Samantha. Wear something honest. It's going to be quite a show." For a moment, she didn't move. Then she whispered, almost trembling, "You'll regret this." I smiled. "No, you will." Outside, the rain had stopped. The air felt lighter, like the storm had passed just for me. I walked to my car, my hands still shaking, but my heart steady. As I sat behind the wheel, I looked back at the shop. Through the window, I saw Samantha standing there, clutching her phone, her perfect reflection shattered by streaks of water on the glass. She looked smaller now, human, cornered. I started the car and whispered to myself, "You called me low class, Samantha, but class isn't what you wear, it's what you don't fake." The road ahead was clear. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid. I had proof, I had purpose, and soon everyone would see who she really was. Because some weddings end with vows, and some end with justice. 2 days after that confrontation at the bridal shop, I met Carter Vance in person. He wasn't what I expected. Instead of a stiff man in a suit, he showed up in jeans, a leather jacket, and that calm, unhurried energy you only see in people who have nothing left to prove. We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of downtown, a place where the coffee was strong and the conversation stayed private. He slid into the booth across from me and placed a folder between us. "Dr. Lane told me you're dealing with something big," he said. His voice was deep, steady. She was right. "I need to know exactly what I'm up against," I said, "before my son marries a woman who's lying to everyone." Carter nodded once, then flipped open the folder. Inside were pages of printed bank statements, emails, and a few black and white photos of a modern office building. "I ran a full trace on Hayes Enterprises," he said. "It's a ghost company. The registration trails through 2 holding firms, then disappears offshore. Standard structure for laundering money." My pulse picked up. "So it's not just fake, it's criminal?" "Pretty much. The company's used to move funds between accounts under different names. I found about $5 million circulating through them in the past year. The transfers are small, 50, 60 grand at a time, but they add up. And guess who's linked to every transaction?" I swallowed hard. "Samantha Hayes." He nodded. "Or whatever her real name is." He pulled out a photocopy of an ID. "Her legal last name isn't Hayes, it's Miller. She changed it 3 years ago, right before launching this family business. Before that, she was charged for prescription fraud in Nevada. Case got dropped when the primary witness disappeared." I sat frozen. My God. Carter took a sip of his coffee, watching me carefully. "I'm guessing your son doesn't know any of this." "No," I whispered. "He believes she's from old money, that her family owns half of California real estate." Carter leaned forward. "Her family are actors, real professionals. I've got their contracts, signed and notarized. She's been paying them through a fake consulting firm. They've attended social events with her before, charity galas, even corporate meetings. She's been rehearsing this scam for years." The words sank in like stones. "And the money?" "Some of it's from credit lines under false names, some from donations through an online wellness foundation she runs. You know what the foundation's registered as?" I shook my head. "Addiction Recovery Charity," he said. "She's been stealing from the very thing you've dedicated your life to." It hit me like a punch to the chest. "She's using recovery as a cover?" Carter nodded grimly. "And the FBI's been watching the foundation's transactions for months. If this wedding happens, your son will be tied to a federal investigation." I covered my mouth, the cafe spinning for a moment. "I have to stop this before he gets hurt." Carter's tone softened. "You will, but you have to be careful. People like her. When they sense you're closing in, they panic, and panic makes them dangerous." I met his gaze. "I'm not afraid of her." He smiled faintly. "You should be afraid for your son. She's capable of anything to protect her image. The kind of people who live inside lies. They don't just crumble. They explode." He slid a flash drive across the table. "This has everything. Financial records, aliases, actor contracts, payment trails. Keep it safe." I held it in my palm, feeling its weight like the truth itself. "Thank you, Mr. Vance." "Carter," he corrected, "and you're welcome. But one more thing, you'll need a public moment, a stage. Somewhere she can't twist the story." My eyes lifted slowly. "The wedding." He nodded. "Exactly. She'll try to humiliate you again. Let her. Then you take back the room." When I drove home that evening, the city lights blurred through my windshield like streaks of gold and gray. I parked outside my house and just sat there for a while, clutching the flash drive. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Inside, the clock on the mantel ticked softly. I walked to my desk and plugged in the drive. Folders opened one by one. Fake invoices, shell accounts, photos of family members on casting websites. I clicked on one last file, a transcript of her past alias applications. In the corner of one page, I saw her handwriting, the same elegant loops she'd used to sign wedding thank-you cards. It felt eerie, like looking at a ghost. I leaned back in my chair and whispered to the empty room, "You built a world out of lies, Samantha. Let's see how you handle the truth." Then I printed every page and placed them neatly in a manila envelope. On the front, I wrote one word in thick black ink: justice. Outside, the night was still. But somewhere out there, I knew Samantha was planning her perfect fairy tale wedding, unaware that the walls around her empire of deceit were about to crack. The night before the wedding felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. The world outside my window was still, but inside my chest, everything was storming. The papers Carter had given me sat on my desk. Proof, justice, destruction, all waiting for dawn. The glow from my desk lamp turned the pages gold, as if truth itself was burning to be set free. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept replaying everything. Samantha's smirk at the bridal shop, Evan's voice breaking when he said I'd gone too far, the text from Carter that morning. FBI surveillance confirmed. She's on their radar. Be cautious tomorrow. I brewed coffee I didn't need, poured it into a mug I'd owned for 20 years, the one Evan had painted in elementary school. The words were faded, but still legible. Best mom ever. I ran my thumb across them, wondering if he still believed that. At 9:40 p.m., the phone rang. Marjorie. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Lillian, I'm at the clinic, but I wanted to check in. Are you ready for tomorrow?" "I don't know if anyone can be ready for something like this." She paused. "You're not just exposing Samantha. You're protecting your son from becoming collateral damage. Remember that." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. What if he never forgives me? "He will," she said softly. "But only if you tell the truth the way you always have, without cruelty, without pride. Just truth." When we hung up, I sat for a long time in silence. Then I reached into my drawer and took out the letter my husband had written to me years before his heart attack. His handwriting was strong, looping, confident. "There will come a time when silence feels safer than truth. That's when you'll need courage the most." I folded the letter and placed it into my clutch for the wedding. At 10:12 p.m., Carter called. "Just one last update before tomorrow," he said. "We traced some of Samantha's payments from Mayfair Consulting to an unlicensed pharmacy supplier. Prescription pills, oxycodone, Adderall, Xanax, all under her maiden name, Miller." I felt a chill. "She's still using?" "Likely. She's been getting them from 4 different doctors. That's not just addiction, that's fraud. If she's caught, it's a federal offense." I swallowed hard. "So tomorrow isn't just about lies, it's about crimes." "Exactly," he said. "You don't need to confront her privately. Let her humiliate herself publicly. The truth always finds its stage." I thanked him and hung up. Outside, the wind had picked up. The trees outside my house swayed against the dark sky, their shadows stretching across the porch. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled faintly. It felt like the calm before something irreversible. I walked through the house, turning off the lights one by one. Each room carried a memory. Evan's laughter from years ago, his college acceptance letter framed in the hallway, the photo of the 3 of us at the Grand Canyon, back when life still felt simple. I stopped in the living room and looked at a framed picture on the mantel. Evan at 10 years old, missing 2 front teeth, holding a handmade sign that said, "I love you, Mom." "I love you too," I whispered. "That's why I have to do this." At midnight, I sat down with my notes and wrote out the speech I'd never planned to give. Not for an audience, not for revenge, but for peace. I started with the same words that had been echoing in my mind for weeks. Class isn't money, it's what you don't fake. The more I wrote, the calmer I felt. By 1:30 a.m., the storm outside had quieted to a drizzle. I gathered all the evidence, contracts, bank records, medical documents, and placed them in a cream-colored envelope. On the front, I wrote in careful cursive, "For the truth." Then, as if guided by instinct, I slipped the old family photo of Evan and me inside, because even when the truth hurts, it should always come with love. Before going to bed, I looked out the window one last time. In the distance, I could see the faint lights of the Desert Crest Country Club, the wedding venue. Even from miles away, it looked like a different world. Marble columns, champagne fountains, chandeliers that probably cost more than my entire business. Tomorrow, that illusion would crack. And when it did, I'd be standing right there to make sure the pieces fell exactly where they belonged. As I turned off the lamp, I whispered to the dark, "You called me low class, Samantha. Let's see how far the high road takes you." Sleep came in fragments. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evan's face. The anger, the confusion, the love still buried somewhere beneath it all. And then, just before dawn, I made peace with what had to happen. Tomorrow, the truth would walk down the aisle, uninvited, unstoppable, and wearing no disguise. Morning broke in soft gold light that painted everything with false calm. For a moment, it almost felt like any other Saturday. Birds outside my window, coffee brewing in the kitchen, the faint hum of sprinklers down the street. But the heaviness in my chest reminded me that nothing about today was ordinary. It was the day my son would marry a stranger wrapped in silk, the day truth would crash through chandeliers and shatter champagne glasses. I stood before the mirror in my bedroom, buttoning my navy blue suit jacket. I'd chosen it deliberately, simple, elegant, unshakably real. No glitter, no designer logos, no pretense. I pinned my late husband's cufflinks on, small silver ovals engraved with his initials, and whispered, "Stay with me today, Henry. I'll need your steadiness." The envelope marked "For the Truth" sat neatly on my dresser. I picked it up, sliding it into my handbag alongside the letter and my phone. The weight felt right, heavier than paper, lighter than guilt. By the time I reached the Desert Crest Country Club, the place looked like something out of a movie. White roses arched over the entrance, gold linens shimmered in the morning sun, and valet attendants moved like a choreographed dance. Samantha's family arrived in a sleek black limousine, stepping out one by one like celebrities walking a red carpet. They played their parts beautifully, her father shaking hands with the manager, her mother pretending to wipe away emotional tears, her uncle joking with the caterers. Watching them, I almost admired their professionalism. Almost. When I entered the hall, the wedding coordinator, a young woman with a clipboard and forced smile, approached me. "Mrs. Grant, welcome. You're seated at table 14 near the entrance." I smiled faintly. "Of course I am." As I made my way through the glittering reception hall, I caught sight of Evan across the room. He looked handsome and nervous in his tuxedo, his hair neatly combed back. He saw me, smiled hesitantly, then glanced toward Samantha, who was posing for photographs with her bridesmaids. Our eyes met for just a moment, long enough for me to see the faint tremor of doubt in his. I wished I could hold him, whisper that everything would make sense soon. But instead, I simply nodded. Sometimes, love meant letting the truth do the talking. I took my seat at table 14, next to the service door, where waiters carried trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The hum of polite conversation filled the air. Glasses clinked. A violin quartet played near the fountain. It was perfect, and that was the problem. I glanced at my phone. A text from Carter blinked on the screen. "Inside the building. All files ready if you need them. Good luck." I slipped the phone away, breathing deeply. The smell of perfume, flowers, and anticipation filled the hall. Every laugh from Samantha's table felt rehearsed. Every gesture from her family was exaggerated. Their synchronization was eerie, almost cinematic. The ceremony began at noon sharp. Samantha glided down the aisle in a gown that sparkled under the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. People gasped softly. Cameras flashed. She looked like perfection personified. Flawless makeup, glowing skin, eyes filled with performative love. But I'd seen what hid behind those eyes. When she reached the altar, she gave Evan a radiant smile. He smiled back, but there was something hesitant in it. Something that made me believe, for the first time in weeks, that maybe he'd sensed the cracks too. The officiant began the vows. Samantha's voice trembled with just the right emotion, every pause carefully timed for effect. "I promise to honor you, to cherish you, to build our future on truth and trust," she said. Truth and trust. The irony nearly made me laugh. The ceremony ended with applause and cheers. As the crowd began filing toward the reception hall, Samantha brushed past me. Her perfume was sweet but suffocating. "Try not to embarrass yourself today," she whispered, smiling for the photographers. I didn't answer. I just looked at her and said softly, "I don't need to. The truth will do that for me." At the reception, I took my seat again at table 14. I could see everything from here. The stage, the toasts, the sparkling chandeliers above. The music swelled as guests clinked glasses and servers poured champagne. I touched the envelope in my purse. My hand no longer shook. Evan's best man gave his speech first, warm and sincere. Then Samantha's father stood to toast, delivering a rehearsed monologue about legacy, hard work, and old money values. Every word was a line from the script Carter had uncovered. And then Samantha herself stood. She lifted her glass and smiled that cruel, perfect smile. "Today," she began, "we're not just celebrating love. We're celebrating family. 2 families becoming one. Some of us have traditions, legacies, reputations that we've built for generations. Others, well, they have their own paths." Her eyes found mine. I felt every gaze turn in my direction. The air grew still. "Some of us," she continued sweetly, "come from modest beginnings, and we admire that. But this is a new chapter, one of refinement, progress, and class. True class." I met her stare, unblinking. Around the room, guests shifted uncomfortably. Evan's expression hardened. And then she said it, the words that would set everything in motion. After all, not everyone understands what it means to belong among people of real status. Some are still learning, and that's okay. The room went silent. I smiled faintly, calm as still water, because if she wanted a stage, she'd just handed it to me. "When they seat you near the door," I whispered to myself, "it's only so you can watch the masks fall." Tomorrow had finally arrived. The reception hall shimmered under the chandeliers, but beneath the glitter and gold, the air was razor thin. Every smile felt strained. Every toast was a performance. Samantha stood at the head table, radiant and poisonous, soaking in the attention like sunlight. When the music quieted, she raised her glass again. "Before we continue," she said, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness, "I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who believed in us, especially my husband's mother." A few guests clapped politely. I felt dozens of eyes turn toward me. My heart thudded, slow but steady. Samantha continued, her tone turning sharp beneath the sugar. "It takes courage to raise a son alone, doesn't it, Mrs. Grant? Truly admirable. Not everyone could do it, but I suppose when you've had simpler beginnings, you learn to make do." The room stirred. Someone cleared their throat. She smiled wider, the kind of smile that hides a dagger. "My mother always says class can't be bought. It's in your blood. You either have it or you don't." A murmur swept through the tables. Laughter, tight, nervous, flickered in corners. I could feel the heat rising in my face, but I stayed still, calm. I thought of Henry's letter, of Marjorie's advice, of Carter waiting somewhere near the back with the truth tucked under his arm. Evan leaned toward her, whispering something. She brushed him off, her eyes locked on me like a hunter cornering its prey. "Oh, don't look so serious," she said lightly. "I'm only teasing. I mean, who cares what anyone did before, right? What matters is who we are now." She laughed. Alone. It was the kind of laughter that made everyone else feel smaller for not joining in. Then she turned to the guests again. "But really, I think it's sweet. Some people dedicate their lives to helping others. Working in care homes, for example. Not glamorous, but noble." My hands tightened around the stem of my glass. The sound of my pulse filled my ears. Samantha looked at me, tilting her head. "You must have so many stories, Mrs. Grant. About your patients?" I met her gaze, smiling thinly. "Yes," I said quietly. "And some of them are about women who mistake cruelty for class." A flicker crossed her face, just for a second, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, I love that," she said, forcing a laugh. "You have such spirit. No wonder Evan is so devoted to you." She reached out and touched his arm possessively, as if claiming ownership. Evan didn't look up. He stared into his glass instead, the shame plain on his face. The band played a soft jazz tune. Waiters moved between tables. Conversation tried to restart, but faltered. The tension was a living thing, stretching from wall to wall. Then the microphone squealed slightly as Samantha took it again. "Since we're all family now," she said brightly, "I think it's only fair to celebrate how far we've all come. My father built Hayes Enterprises from the ground up, turning it into a $5 million family company. Generations of excellence." Carter, standing near the sound booth, glanced at me and gave the faintest nod. She went on, her voice growing grander. "When two families of equal class unite, it's a true partnership, real legacy, real value." The words equal class hung in the air like poison gas. That was it, the final straw. I rose from my seat slowly. The motion drew every eye in the room. Even the violinist stopped mid-note. Samantha blinked, surprised but still smug. "Oh, Mrs. Grant," she said with a laugh, "you don't have to stand. Please sit." I lifted my glass, steady. "No," I said clearly, my voice echoing across the marble hall. "I think it's time I did." Silence rippled outward. Even the waiters froze. "I've listened all afternoon to talk of class," I said, calm but firm. "And you're right, Samantha. Class isn't something you buy. It's something you live." Her smile faltered. "Well, of course but there's one thing you're wrong about," I continued. "Class doesn't mean pretending to be something you're not." The crowd shifted. Whispers. Confusion. Evan stood, alarmed. "Mom, what are you doing?" I looked at him gently. What I should have done months ago. Then I turned back to Samantha. "You called me low class," I said softly. "But tell me, dear, what does that make someone who builds her entire life on lies?" Her face drained of color. "Excuse me?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. "You said your father built Hayes Enterprises from the ground up, that your family fortune was $5 million. You even told my son you came from a legacy." I held up the papers. "But these documents tell a different story." Gasps rippled through the room. Samantha took a step back. "You're insane," she hissed. "Oh, I wish I were." I nodded toward Carter. He stepped forward, calm, professional, carrying a small projector case. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice even, "allow me to introduce the real founders of Hayes Enterprises." He pressed a button. The wall behind the stage lit up with photographs, headshots, watermarked with Bright Scene Casting Agency. One by one, images appeared. Samantha's father, her mother, her uncle, each with a note beside their photo. Professional actor, hired for Hayes campaign, 3 years consecutive. The audience erupted in disbelief. Gasps, shouts, laughter from someone in the back, sharp and cruel. Samantha stumbled, her breath shallow. This is fake!" But the evidence was undeniable. Carter held up bank records. Payments made from Mayfair Consulting, all directed by Samantha Miller, her legal name before she became Samantha Hayes. "Stop!" she shouted. Evan stared at her, face pale as marble. "Sam, what is this?" "It's not what it looks like," she said, trembling. They helped me with publicity, that's all." I stepped closer, my voice calm, almost tender. "Sweetheart, you can't call something a family business if you had to rent the family." A wave of murmurs spread through the hall. Samantha looked around desperately. No one would meet her eyes. The mask had fallen, and all that remained was silence. Thick, suffocating silence. I set my glass down and said quietly, "You called me low class, but class is what's left when the lies are gone." The room burst into chaos, voices overlapping, phones recording, whispers turning into shouts. Samantha's carefully built kingdom had just crumbled in front of 150 witnesses, and somewhere behind me I heard Evan whisper my name. "Mom." Not in anger this time, but in awe. The truth had finally taken its place at the head table. For a long, frozen moment, no one moved. The truth hung in the air like shattered glass, reflecting every false sparkle of that grand ballroom. Samantha stood rooted at the center of it all, her hands trembling, her perfect facade cracking under the weight of everything she'd built from lies. Someone gasped near the bar. Another guest whispered, "Actors? Did she just say actors?" The murmur spread like wildfire, rising into a stunned chorus of disbelief. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Carter switched slides again, revealing a screenshot of a bank transfer. Mayfair Consulting to Bright Scene Casting Agency, $7,800. Then another, $3,200 to Davenport Wardrobe Rentals. Each transfer dated the same month Samantha had introduced her so-called family to Evan. He faced the crowd, his voice calm, crisp, professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, every face you've seen representing the Hayes family was paid to appear in marketing photos, social media content, and later, this wedding. This wasn't a legacy. This was a production." Someone near the back laughed. Short, sharp, cruel. Another woman clapped her hand over her mouth. The air crackled with tension, scandal, and the faint sound of a champagne glass rolling off a table and shattering on the floor. Samantha tried to steady herself, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. This is a misunderstanding. I had to create an image for investors." "Investors?" I said quietly. "You mean the same investors you defrauded through your fake pharmaceutical sales company?" Because Carter traced those too. The crowd turned toward her again, the disbelief now sharper, colder. Carter pulled up another image, screenshots of emails, invoices, medical suppliers, all signed by Samantha Miller. The room buzzed. Evan's face turned white. "Sam, is that true?" Her breath came in short bursts. "Evan, please, I was going to tell you. I just needed time to fix things." "Fix things?" he said softly, shaking his head. "You told me your father left you a company. You said you wanted me to be part of it." She reached for him. "Because I love you. I did it all for us." He stepped back. "You did it for yourself." I stood where I was, hands clasped in front of me, the fury long gone, replaced by something quieter, heavier. The kind of sadness that comes from realizing you'd been fighting a ghost all along. One of the family members, the man who had been introduced as Samantha's uncle, took a nervous step forward. "Look, I didn't know what she was planning for today. I was told this was a private event gig. Photos, a speech. I had no idea it was real." That broke the room open. The murmur turned into an uproar. Reporters, yes, there were local journalists invited, started whispering furiously, phones up, recording. Samantha's voice rose above the noise, raw and desperate. "You all think you're better than me? You don't know what it's like to come from nothing. I built this from scratch. I made something out of nothing." Her eyes found me, wild, pleading. "You, of all people, should understand, Lillian. You were poor, too. You had nothing." I met her gaze evenly. "You're right," I said softly. "I came from nothing. But I didn't lie to make it look like something." Her face contorted. Rage, shame, panic, all fighting for space. Then Carter stepped forward again, his tone final. "Mrs. Miller, Samantha, Your fake company is currently under federal review for fraudulent operations. The FBI received the files this morning." Gasps rippled again. Samantha froze. You can't." "They can," I said. "And they will." She spun toward Evan, voice cracking. "Evan, please, tell them this isn't who I am." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "I don't even know who you are." Silence fell heavier than before, and then, as if scripted by fate, one of the hired actors, her father, spoke up, unable to bear it anymore. She promised we'd just smile for photos, said it was harmless, none of us knew she'd marry into it. Samantha stumbled backward, catching the edge of the table. Her champagne flute toppled, spilling golden liquid across the floor. "This isn't happening," she whispered. "This isn't happening." It was happening. Every lie she'd told was now a headline forming in the minds of everyone in that room. And still, I stood calm, because justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand long enough for everyone to see. When the chaos quieted slightly, I stepped closer to her. My voice was low, but clear enough for the microphone to catch. "You called me low class," I said, "but the only thing beneath class is fraud, and you built your entire empire on it." Samantha looked around wildly, eyes darting from Evan to the stunned guests. "You'll all regret this," she hissed. "You think you're better? You're not." Then she turned to leave, but the moment she did, a small plastic bottle slipped from her purse, rolling across the marble floor. The room froze. Carter bent down, picked it up, and held it up to the light. Prescription pills, her name, multiple doctor signatures. He looked at her grimly. Addiction, fraud, impersonation, falsified identities. That's quite the resume, Ms. Miller. And just like that, her empire, her illusion, was gone. She stood there, surrounded by luxury she didn't own, by people who'd never known her, by lies she couldn't keep straight anymore. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about release. I took a slow breath, then said, "The truth always finds a way to RSVP." And this time, the room didn't laugh. They applauded. Softly at first, then louder, fuller, a sound of collective relief, of disbelief, of justice. Samantha sank into a chair, her makeup streaking as she whispered, "You ruined me." I looked at her gently. "No, dear, you ruined yourself. I just turned on the lights." The chandeliers above flickered slightly, as if even they were exhaling. Evan looked at me, eyes full of pain, but also understanding. The kind that takes years to grow, but seconds to bloom when truth finally arrives. The cameras flashed again, but this time, they weren't capturing glamour. They were capturing the end of a lie. The sound of applause still echoed faintly, mingled with the metallic clatter of a champagne flute tipping over. Then came silence, the kind that feels like the air has been emptied from the room. Samantha sat collapsed in her chair, the hem of her gown pooling around her like spilled milk, her mascara bleeding into rivers down her cheeks. Her family had vanished quietly, slipping out through the side door. The performance was over. Evan stood motionless in the center of it all. His tuxedo looked too big for him now, his face pale, eyes lost. I'd seen that look before, on soldiers in the care home I once managed, men who'd come home from battles they never wanted to fight. He turned toward me, voice breaking. "Mom, I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to," I said softly. "Just breathe." He rubbed his temple, shaking his head. "I defended her. I ignored you. I told you she was different." "She was different," I said gently. "Just not in the way you thought." Samantha looked up then, her voice trembling with something between rage and despair. "You think you're better than me, Lillian? You think you're the hero in this story?" I met her gaze evenly. "No, I think I'm the one who stopped pretending." She gave a bitter laugh, then reached for her clutch. Her hand shook as she fumbled it open, spilling more pill bottles across the table. Gasps rippled again. Carter stepped forward calmly, picking them up. "Doctor shopping, multiple aliases, unlicensed prescriptions," he said quietly. "You'll need to come with us, Ms. Miller." Samantha looked around desperately. "No, I need to talk to Evan. Just one more chance, please." But Evan took a step back, his eyes filling with something heavier than anger. "You had every chance, Sam. You didn't need to fake who you were. You just had to be honest." She tried to stand, but her knees gave out. The guards Carter had called earlier moved forward gently, not unkindly, guiding her out of the ballroom. The train of her gown dragged behind her like a ghost of what she'd tried to be. When the doors closed, the room finally exhaled. The guests began whispering again, phones buzzing with messages, servers quietly cleaning broken glass. The orchestra sat still, their instruments silent, unsure if the music would ever resume. I turned to Evan. "Let's go home," I said softly. He hesitated. "Home?" "Yes," I said. "The place where love isn't measured by net worth." Outside, the afternoon sun was already softening into gold. Reporters hovered at the gates, cameras flashing. Carter handled them with quiet efficiency, shielding us. Marjorie was waiting by her car, arms crossed but smiling faintly. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I am," I said, for the first time in a long time. 3 months later, life had resumed its quiet rhythm. My garden bloomed again, full of lilacs and morning dew. The house no longer felt empty. Evan moved back to town, helping me with the care home expansion. He was quieter now, more thoughtful, humbled by everything, but lighter too. One evening, he came over for dinner. He was setting the table when he said softly, "Mom, I'm sorry for everything." I looked up from the stove, smiling. "You were in love, Evan. Love makes people blind, but truth makes them see again." He laughed softly. "You always have a quote ready." "Occupational hazard," I said, placing the soup on the table. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then he said, "I heard the FBI's case against Samantha is moving fast." I nodded. "Carter says she's cooperating. She might even avoid prison if she helps uncover the other people involved." "Do you think she'll change?" I paused. "People can always change, but only when they stop lying to themselves first." Later that night, after he left, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The stars were bright, the kind Henry used to point out when Evan was small. The air was cool, calm, full of peace I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name written in shaky handwriting. Inside was a single note. "I'm sorry. For everything. You were right. Class isn't about blood or money or appearance. It's about honesty. I hope one day you'll forgive me. S.M." I folded the letter and placed it in my journal, not out of forgiveness, but closure. That evening, I visited the care home where I used to work, bringing flowers to one of the residents. As I walked through the familiar halls, a new volunteer smiled at me and said, "You must be Mrs. Grant. Everyone here says you're a legend." I laughed softly. Legend's a big word. I just believe in doing what's right, even when it hurts. Before I left, I sat for a moment by the piano in the lobby. I ran my fingers across the keys, playing a soft melody, something between mourning and victory. And in that quiet moment, I spoke to the memory of my husband, to the son I'd nearly lost, to the woman I'd once been. "Class isn't what you own," I whispered. "It's what you refuse to fake." Outside, the wind carried the scent of lilacs. Somewhere, justice had finally settled. Not loud, not cruel, just steady. And as the last notes of the piano faded, so did the ache in my heart. Because sometimes, revenge isn't destruction, it's revelation. And sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is tell the truth and let the world adjust around it. The camera would fade there, on a woman sitting at peace, her head high, her garden alive again. Not a victim, not a villain, just a mother who refused to bow. End of screenplay. My son's bride called me low-class trash, so I exposed her $5 million family business as a fake company.